Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stepped onto the aircraft carrier deck as the salty Pacific wind whipped through her dark hair. At 28 years old, she had already earned her wings as one of the Navy's most skilled helicopter pilots. But today felt different. Today, she would meet the elite SEAL team she'd been assigned to support for the next 6 months. The morning sun cast long shadows across the USS Ronald Reagan as Sarah made her way to the briefing room. Her flight suit bore the name tag Martinez, and beneath it, her call sign, Iron Widow. She had earned that name during her training days, not because she was cold or heartless, but because she had an uncanny ability to bring everyone home safely, no matter how dangerous the mission. Sarah's journey to this moment had been anything but easy. Growing up in a small town in Texas, she was the daughter of a mechanic and a schoolteacher. Her father, Miguel Martinez, had served briefly in the Army before an injury sent him home. He filled their garage with stories of helicopters and the brave pilots who flew them. Sarah would sit for hours, listening to his tales while helping him fix engines. When she turned 18, Sarah shocked her family by announcing she wanted to join the Navy and become a pilot. Her mother, Elena, worried constantly. "Flying is dangerous, mija," she would say. But Sarah's mind was made up. She wanted to serve her country and prove that a girl from a small Texas town could soar with the best of them. The Naval Academy was brutal. Sarah faced discrimination from day one. Some instructors doubted her abilities simply because she was a woman. Male cadets would make jokes about her small frame, questioning whether she could handle the physical demands of military aviation. But Sarah pressed on, studying harder than anyone else, spending extra hours in the gym, and never backing down from a challenge. Flight school was where Sarah truly found her calling. The moment she first took control of a helicopter, something clicked. The complex machine felt like an extension of her body. Her instructors were amazed at her natural ability to handle emergency situations. During one training exercise, when her co-pilot panicked during a simulated engine failure, Sarah calmly took control and executed a perfect emergency landing. It was during advanced combat training that Sarah earned her call sign. The exercise involved rescuing a team of Marines from a hostile zone while under heavy simulated fire. Other pilots had attempted the mission but failed due to the intense pressure and complex maneuvering required. When Sarah's turn came, she approached the situation differently. Instead of rushing in, she studied the terrain and enemy positions. She noticed a narrow canyon that would provide cover but required extremely precise flying. With nerves of steel, Sarah navigated her helicopter through the treacherous path, extracted the Marines, and brought them to safety without a single casualty. The commanding officer was so impressed that he said she flew like a black widow spider, patient, calculating, and absolutely deadly when necessary. The name stuck, but over time it evolved to Iron Widow as Sarah's reputation for bringing everyone home safely grew. She never lost a crew member or passenger during her 5 years of active duty. This perfect record, combined with her unshakable composure under pressure, made her legendary among Navy pilots. Now, walking into the briefing room aboard the carrier, Sarah could feel the weight of curious stares. SEAL Team 7 was already seated, 12 men in their prime, all battle-hardened veterans. At the head of the table sat Admiral James Hawk Harrison, a legend in the SEAL community. At 52, Harrison had led more successful operations than most officers could dream of. His weathered face told stories of countless battles, and his steely gray eyes had seen things that would break lesser men. "Gentlemen," Admiral Harrison began, his voice carrying the authority of decades of command, "meet your new pilot for Operation Neptune's Fury." He gestured towards Sarah as she entered. "Lieutenant Martinez will be providing air support and extraction for the next phase of our mission." The room fell silent except for a few barely audible chuckles. Sarah kept her expression neutral, but she could feel the skeptical energy in the room. These men had worked together for years, trusting their lives to each other in the most dangerous situations imaginable. Now, they were being asked to trust a pilot they'd never met. Petty Officer First Class Jake Bulldog Thompson, a barrel-chested man with arms like tree trunks, was the first to speak. "No offense, sir, but what's our experience with combat operations? We're not running training exercises here." Sarah remained standing at attention, waiting for permission to speak. Admiral Harrison nodded at her. "Lieutenant, why don't you brief the team on your qualifications?" "Yes, sir," Sarah replied crisply. "I've completed 67 combat missions over the past 18 months, including 12 high-risk extractions in hostile territory. I've flown support for Marine Force Recon, Army Rangers, and Delta Force operations. 0 casualties under my command." The men exchanged glances. The statistics were impressive, but statistics didn't tell the whole story. Chief Petty Officer Marcus "Ghost" Williams, the team's demolitions expert, leaned back in his chair. 67 missions is good, but have you ever been in a real firefight? When the bullets start flying and everything goes to hell, how do we know you won't freeze up? Sarah had heard these questions before. She understood their concerns. Their lives would be in her hands. "Chief Williams, I understand your skepticism. All I can say is that my record speaks for itself. When you're ready to trust me, I'll be ready to bring you home." Admiral Harrison pulled up a map on the large screen at the front of the room. "The mission is straightforward, but dangerous. Intelligence suggests a high-value target is being held at a compound in the mountains of Afghanistan. The terrain is treacherous, narrow valleys, unpredictable weather, and heavy enemy presence. We'll need a pilot who can navigate in conditions where others fear to fly." As Harrison outlined the mission details, Sarah studied every aspect. The compound was situated in a valley surrounded by peaks reaching over 10,000 feet. The only approach was through a narrow gorge with steep walls on both sides. Weather reports showed possible storms moving in, which would reduce visibility to near zero. It was exactly the type of mission that had earned her the Iron Widow call sign. Staff Sergeant Mike "Razor" Rodriguez, the team's medic, raised his hand. "Sir, what's the backup plan if our pilot can't handle the conditions? That gorge is a death trap in bad weather." Before Admiral Harrison could answer, Sarah spoke up. "Sergeant Rodriguez, there is no backup plan. Either I get you in and out safely, or the mission fails. I don't intend to let that happen." Her confidence was evident, but the SEALs remained unconvinced. They had worked with many pilots over the years, and while some were skilled, few could handle the extreme conditions they often faced. The stakes were always life and death, and they weren't ready to bet their lives on an unknown quantity, regardless of her impressive service record. Lieutenant Commander Paul "Viper" Nash, the team's second-in-command, studied Sarah carefully. "Iron Widow, right? Interesting call sign. How'd you earn it?" Sarah met his gaze directly. "By never leaving anyone behind, sir, no matter what it takes." The room was quiet for a moment. Admiral Harrison closed the mission briefing folder. "We deploy in 72 hours. I suggest you all get acquainted. Your lives are going to depend on each other." As the meeting broke up, Sarah noticed the SEALs clustering together, speaking in low voices. She caught fragments of their conversation, words like inexperienced, liability, and risk. It stung, but she had faced doubt before. The only way to earn their respect was to prove herself in action. That evening, Sarah found herself alone on the flight deck, performing her pre-flight inspection on her helicopter, a heavily modified Black Hawk equipped with the latest navigation and defense systems. The aircraft was her sanctuary, the one place where she felt completely in control. "Quite a machine," a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to see Admiral Harrison approaching. Even in the dim light of the deck, his presence was commanding. "Yes, sir." She's been good to me, Sarah replied, continuing her inspection. Harrison studied the helicopter's modifications. I've read your file, Martinez. Very impressive record. But I have to ask, are you ready for this? My men are the best at what they do, but they're skeptical about working with someone new. Sarah set down her checklist and faced the Admiral directly. Sir, I understand their concerns. They don't know me, and trust isn't something that can be ordered. But I've never failed a mission, and I don't plan to start now. The conditions we're going into are unlike anything you've faced before, Harrison continued. Mountain warfare is unpredictable. Weather can change in minutes. Enemy positions are dug in and well defended. One mistake, and my entire team could be lost. I understand the risks, sir, but with respect, I've been preparing for missions like this my entire career. I know my capabilities, and I know my aircraft. Your men will come home safely. Admiral Harrison studied her for a long moment. I hope you're right, Lieutenant, because if you're not, a lot of good men are going to die. As Harrison walked away, Sarah returned to her inspection. She understood the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. Tomorrow, she would have to prove that her call sign wasn't just a clever nickname, it was a promise. A promise that no matter how dangerous the mission became, she would bring every member of SEAL Team 7 home alive. The next morning, Sarah woke before dawn and made her way to the gym. Physical fitness was crucial for pilots, especially when flying in combat conditions. The stress and G-forces could be overwhelming for someone not in peak condition. As she began her workout routine, she was surprised to find several members of SEAL Team 7 already there. Chief Williams was bench pressing an impressive amount of weight while Sergeant Rodriguez spotted him. They nodded politely when they saw Sarah, but continued their conversation without including her. She had expected this. Military units were tight-knit, and outsiders had to earn their place gradually. Sarah focused on her own routine, working through a series of exercises designed to strengthen her core and improve her reaction time. She had learned early in her career that physical preparation was just as important as mental preparation. Flying a helicopter in combat required split-second decisions and the physical ability to handle intense situations for hours at a time. After her workout, Sarah headed to the briefing room for the mission planning session. The room was already full when she arrived, with detailed maps and satellite images covering every available surface. Admiral Harrison stood at the front, pointing to various locations on a large topographical map. The compound is here, he said, indicating a spot deep in the mountainous region. Intelligence suggests 12 to 15 hostiles, armed with small arms and possibly RPGs. The hostage is being held in the main building, but we don't know exactly where. Sarah studied the terrain carefully. The mountains rose sharply on all sides, creating natural choke points that would be perfect for enemy ambushes. The landing zone was small and surrounded by rocky outcroppings that would make approach difficult. Weather reports showed a storm system moving in from the west, which could arrive during their mission window. What's our extraction timeline? Asked Lieutenant Commander Nash. Wheels up at 0300 hours, Harrison replied. Flight time to target is approximately 2 hours. We'll have a 30-minute window to complete the mission before we need to extract. Any longer, and we risk being caught in that storm. Sarah raised her hand. Sir, what's our backup LZ if the primary is compromised? Harrison pointed to a spot about 2 kilometers from the compound. There's a small clearing here, but it's even more dangerous to reach. We'd prefer to stick with the primary. As the briefing continued, Sarah made mental notes about every aspect of the mission. She visualized the approach route, considered alternative paths if they encountered problems, and calculated fuel requirements for various scenarios. This level of preparation had kept her and her passengers alive through dozens of dangerous missions. After the briefing, the team spent the rest of the day going through equipment checks and rehearsing various scenarios. Sarah worked closely with the aircraft maintenance crew, ensuring every system was functioning perfectly. She couldn't afford any mechanical failures during such a critical mission. That evening, as Sarah reviewed the mission plans one final time, Petty Officer Thompson approached her. "Mind if I ask you something, Lieutenant?" "Go ahead, Petty Officer." "That call sign of yours, Iron Widow, some of the guys think it means you're cold, you know. Like you don't care about the people you're flying." Sarah looked up from her papers. "What do you think it means?" Thompson shrugged. "I've been doing this for 8 years. I've flown with a lot of pilots. The good ones, they care about getting the job done. The great ones, they care about getting everyone home. I'm hoping you're one of the great ones." "I am," Sarah replied simply. "You'll see tomorrow." As Thompson walked away, Sarah felt a small sense of progress. At least one member of the team was willing to give her a chance. She returned to her preparations, knowing that in just a few hours she would have to prove that her confidence was justified. The pre-dawn hours came quickly. Sarah was already in the cockpit running through her final checks when the SEALs arrived. They moved with the quiet efficiency that marked elite soldiers, each man carrying exactly what he needed and nothing more. Admiral Harrison took the co-pilot seat while the rest of the team secured themselves in the passenger compartment. "All systems green," Sarah reported. "Ready for departure on your command, sir." Harrison keyed his radio. "Tower, this is Neptune 7, requesting clearance for departure." "Neptune 7, you are cleared for takeoff. Good hunting." Sarah lifted the helicopter smoothly from the deck, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with the start of a mission. As they flew into the darkness, she couldn't know that in just a few hours, everything she had trained for would be put to the ultimate test. The Black Hawk helicopter cut through the pre-dawn darkness like a shadow against the star-filled sky. Sarah Martinez gripped the controls with steady hands as they flew deeper into enemy territory. The landscape below had transformed from the relatively flat coastal regions to increasingly rugged mountains that rose like giant teeth from the earth. 2 hours into the flight, the first signs of trouble appeared on the horizon. Dark clouds were building much faster than the weather reports had predicted, and Sarah could see flashes of lightning in the distance. The storm system was moving in ahead of schedule, which meant their window for completing the mission was shrinking rapidly. "Admiral, we've got weather moving in faster than expected," Sarah reported through the intercom. "Estimate 30 minutes before it reaches the target area." Admiral Harrison studied his tablet, checking the latest satellite updates. "How much time do we need for extraction?" "Minimum 15 minutes from wheels down to wheels up, sir. That's if everything goes perfectly." In the passenger compartment, the SEALs were making final preparations. Each man checked his weapon, adjusted his gear, and ran through the mission plan one more time. They had done this countless times before, but tonight felt different. Tonight, their success depended on a pilot they barely knew. Chief Williams looked out the window at the approaching storm. "This is going to get ugly fast," he muttered to Sergeant Rodriguez. "Hope she knows what she's doing." Sarah's voice came through the intercom again. "Beginning approach to target area. Recommend we move fast once we're on the ground. That storm's going to hit hard." The helicopter began to descend toward the narrow valley that housed their target compound. The terrain was even more challenging than the maps had suggested. Jagged peaks rose on both sides, creating a natural corridor that was barely wide enough for the helicopter's rotor span. One mistake, and they would be smashed against the rocky walls. As they dropped lower, Sarah's night vision equipment revealed the details of the compound below. It was larger than intelligence had suggested, with several buildings scattered across a flat area in the center of the valley. Guards were visible at various positions, their weapons glinting in the helicopter's infrared sensors. "Target in sight," Admiral Harrison announced. "I count at least 20 hostiles, more than we expected. This just got a lot more complicated." Sarah found the designated landing zone, a small clearing about 200 meters from the main compound. It was tight, with large rocks and scraggly trees marking the boundaries. She would have to set the helicopter down with precision, leaving barely any margin for error. "LZ looks good," she reported. "Starting my approach." The descent was slow and careful. Sarah used every bit of her training and experience to navigate between the obstacles. The helicopter's rotor wash kicked up clouds of dust and debris, reducing visibility to almost nothing. She had to rely on her instruments and years of muscle memory to guide the aircraft safely to the ground. "Touchdown," Sarah announced as the wheels settled onto the rocky ground. "Good luck, gentlemen." The SEALs moved out quickly, disappearing into the darkness like ghosts. Admiral Harrison remained in the co-pilot seat, coordinating the operation through his radio headset. Sarah kept the engines running but powered down the rotor to reduce noise. Now came the hardest part: waiting. The compound erupted into chaos within minutes. Sarah could hear gunfire echoing off the valley walls as SEAL Team 7 engaged the enemy. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like deadly fireflies. Over the radio, she heard fragments of communication between the team members. "Contact left. 3 down. Moving to the main building." Admiral Harrison monitored the situation intently. "How's it looking, Viper?" Lieutenant Commander Nash's voice crackled through the radio. "Heavier resistance than expected, sir. We're making progress, but it's slow going. Need another 10 minutes. Sarah glanced at the storm approaching from the west. The lightning was getting closer, and she could feel the first gusts of wind rocking the helicopter. "Admiral, that storm's going to be on top of us in 15 minutes. We need to be airborne before it hits, or we're not getting out of here." "Copy that. Viper, you heard the lady. We need to speed this up." The next few minutes felt like hours. Sarah watched the storm clouds rolling closer while listening to the firefight raging at the compound. The wind was picking up steadily, causing the helicopter to shift and rock despite being on the ground. She had to constantly adjust the controls to keep the aircraft stable. Then, the radio erupted with urgent voices. "Man down! Bulldogs hit! Need immediate medical attention!" Sarah's heart raced. She knew that Petty Officer Thompson had been wounded, but she couldn't see what was happening from her position. Admiral Harrison was already coordinating the response. "How bad is it, Ghost?" Harrison asked. Chief Williams' voice was tense. "Took one in the leg. Lot of blood. Razor's working on him, but we need to get him out of here fast." "Package secured," came another voice. It was Nash. "Got our guy, but he's in rough shape. Can barely walk." Sarah looked at the approaching storm and made a quick calculation. The wind was already affecting the helicopter's stability, and it would only get worse. But she had made a promise. No one gets left behind. "Admiral, I can get closer to the compound. There's a spot about 50 meters from the main building where I can set down temporarily." Harrison shook his head. "Too dangerous. The LZ is surrounded by enemy positions." "Sir, with respect, Thompson needs medical attention now. And if that storm hits while we're trying to extract from here, we might not make it out at all." Over the radio, they could hear Sergeant Rodriguez treating Thompson's wound. "Bleeding's controlled, but he needs surgery. Soon." Sarah made her decision. "I'm repositioning closer to the compound. Mark your positions with IR strobes so I don't land on top of you." Before Admiral Harrison could object, Sarah was already powering up the rotor and lifting off. The helicopter rose into the increasingly turbulent air, buffeted by wind gusts that threatened to slam it into the valley walls. Flying in deteriorating weather conditions while under enemy fire required every bit of skill Sarah possessed. She had to constantly adjust for wind shear while avoiding the rocky outcroppings that seemed to reach out like grasping fingers in the darkness. Enemy gunfire erupted from several positions as they realized what she was trying to do. Tracers zipped past the helicopter's windows as Sarah maneuvered toward the compound. She could hear the distinctive crack of bullets passing close to the aircraft, but she maintained her focus on the landing zone. This was what she had trained for, flying in impossible conditions when lives hung in the balance. Jesus Christ, she's actually doing it, Chief Williams muttered as he watched the helicopter approach through the gunfire and swirling dust. Sarah found the small clearing Nash had marked with IR strobes. It was even tighter than the original LZ, with buildings on 3 sides and enemy positions dangerously close. But it would cut the team's evacuation distance in half, potentially saving Thompson's life. The landing was like threading a needle in a hurricane. Wind gusts tried to slam the helicopter into the surrounding buildings, while enemy gunfire intensified. Sarah fought the controls, using every ounce of her strength and skill to keep the aircraft stable. At one point, the rotor blades came within inches of striking a concrete wall. "Touchdown! Move! Move! Move!" Sarah shouted into the radio. The SEALs emerged from the compound carrying Thompson and supporting the rescued hostage. Chief Williams and Sergeant Rodriguez carried Thompson between them while Lieutenant Commander Nash helped the barely conscious hostage. The rest of the team provided covering fire as they rushed toward the helicopter. Enemy fighters appeared on the rooftops, firing down at the evacuation site. Sarah could hear bullets striking the helicopter's armored hull. One round spiderwebbed the windscreen inches from her head, but she kept her hand steady on the controls. "Get them loaded!" Admiral Harrison shouted, returning fire with his sidearm through the co-pilot's window. The team reached the helicopter and began loading the casualties. Thompson was conscious but pale from blood loss, while the hostage was barely responsive after weeks of captivity. Sergeant Rodriguez continued working on Thompson's wound, even as enemy fire erupted around them. "That's everyone," Nash reported as the last SEAL climbed aboard. But before Sarah could lift off, a new threat emerged. Enemy fighters had positioned an RPG launcher on a nearby rooftop, and the rocket was already in flight toward the helicopter. "RPG incoming!" someone shouted. Sarah reacted instantly, pulling the helicopter up and to the left in a violent, evasive maneuver. The rocket streaked past the aircraft's tail, missing by less than 10 feet before exploding against the valley wall. The blast wave rocked the helicopter, but Sarah maintained control. However, the evasive action had brought them dangerously close to the enemy positions. Concentrated gunfire erupted from multiple directions, and Sarah could hear the distinctive sound of rounds penetrating the aircraft's hull. Warning lights began flashing on the instrument panel. "We're taking hits," Admiral Harrison reported. "Hydraulic systems damaged." Sarah felt the controls become sluggish as hydraulic fluid leaked from the damaged system. The helicopter was still flyable, but it would be much harder to control, especially in the worsening weather conditions. "I can get us out," Sarah said through gritted teeth, fighting to keep the aircraft stable. "But it's going to be rough." She pulled the helicopter up and out of the valley, climbing as fast as the damaged aircraft could manage. Behind them, enemy muzzle flashes lit up the compound as fighters realized their targets were escaping. But their troubles were far from over. The storm had arrived with devastating force. Wind gusts exceeding 60 miles per hour slammed into the helicopter from all directions. Rain and hail began pelting the windscreen, reducing visibility to near zero. Lightning flashed constantly, creating a strobe effect that was disorienting and dangerous. Flying a damaged helicopter through a mountain thunderstorm at night was beyond dangerous. It was nearly suicidal. But Sarah had no choice. Thompson needed medical attention urgently, and the hostage was in critical condition. She had to get them back to the carrier no matter what. The damaged hydraulic system made every control input require tremendous physical effort. Sarah's arms burned from the strain of fighting the controls, while the storm tried to tear the helicopter apart. Sweat poured down her face despite the cold mountain air rushing through bullet holes in the cabin. "How much farther?" Admiral Harrison asked, watching Sarah struggle with the controls. 90 minutes if we can maintain current speed," Sarah replied, her voice strained. "But we're losing hydraulic fluid fast. Controls are getting heavier." In the passenger compartment, Sergeant Rodriguez continued working on both casualties. Thompson's condition was stable but serious, while the hostage was showing signs of shock and dehydration. Every few minutes, turbulence would slam them against the cabin walls, making medical treatment extremely difficult. Chief Williams moved up to the cockpit area. "Anything we can do to help?" "Pray we don't lose complete hydraulic pressure," Sarah replied. "If that happens, we're going down." The storm seemed to intensify with each passing minute. Lightning strikes came dangerously close to the helicopter, and the thunder was so loud it drowned out the engine noise. Sarah had to navigate by instruments alone, trusting her training and experience to keep them on course toward the carrier. 30 minutes into the flight back, the situation became critical. A warning alarm began blaring as hydraulic pressure dropped to dangerous levels. Sarah could barely move the controls, requiring both hands and all her strength just to maintain level flight. "We're losing it," she announced. "Hydraulic systems failing completely." Admiral Harrison studied the map on his tablet. "There's an emergency landing field about 20 minutes ahead. Military outpost with a medical facility." "Can we make it?" Chief Williams asked. Sarah's arms were shaking from the effort of controlling the aircraft. Every muscle in her body screamed with fatigue, but she kept fighting. "We're going to find out." The next 20 minutes were the longest of Sarah's career. With virtually no hydraulic assistance, flying the helicopter was like trying to steer a runaway truck with a rope. Every gust of wind threatened to send them tumbling out of control. Her hands were cramping from gripping the controls so tightly, and her shoulders felt like they were on fire. But gradually, through the storm and darkness, lights began to appear ahead. The emergency airfield was small, but had a working runway and medical facilities. It wasn't the carrier, but it would have to do. "Field in sight," Sarah reported, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Beginning emergency approach." The landing approach was the most difficult thing Sarah had ever attempted. With no hydraulic assistance and deteriorating weather conditions, she had to use every technique she'd ever learned just to keep the helicopter pointed in the right direction. The aircraft bucked and shuddered like an angry animal, fighting her every input. At 50 feet above the runway, a massive wind gust caught the helicopter and tried to flip it upside down. Sarah threw all her weight into the controls, somehow managing to level the aircraft. Her vision was beginning to blur from exhaustion, but she couldn't give up now. The wheels touched down hard, bouncing twice before settling onto the runway. Sarah immediately shut down the engines, her hands shaking uncontrollably from the strain. She had done it, gotten everyone home safely despite impossible odds. Medical personnel rushed out to meet them as the rotor wound down. Thompson and the hostage were quickly loaded onto stretchers and rushed to the base hospital. The SEALs gathered around the damaged helicopter, looking at the multiple bullet holes and hydraulic fluid pooling on the runway. Admiral Harrison approached Sarah as she finally climbed out of the cockpit. Her flight suit was soaked with sweat, and her hands were still shaking from the physical effort of the flight. "That was some flying, Lieutenant," he said quietly. "I've never seen anything like it." Sarah nodded tiredly. "Just doing my job, sir. How are Thompson and the hostage?" "Docs say Thompson will be fine. Lost some blood, but no permanent damage. The hostage is stable. They're both going to make it thanks to you." As the adrenaline began to wear off, Sarah felt the full weight of what they had accomplished. She had proven herself under the most extreme conditions imaginable, earning the respect of some of the military's most elite warriors. Chief Williams approached, his usual skeptical expression replaced by something approaching awe. "Ma'am, I owe you an apology. When I first heard your call sign, I thought it meant you were cold. Now I understand. You're Iron Widow because you protect everyone under your care, no matter what it costs you." For the first time since the mission began, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "That's exactly what it means, Chief. No one gets left behind. Ever." As they waited for transport back to the carrier, Sarah realized that something fundamental had changed. the SEALs no longer saw her as an outsider or a liability. She had earned her place among them through actions rather than words, proving that her call sign wasn't just a nickname, it was a promise she was willing to die to keep. 6 months later, Sarah Martinez stood on the deck of the USS Ronald Reagan, watching the sun set over the Pacific Ocean. The aircraft carrier was heading home after a successful deployment, and Sarah's reputation had spread throughout the entire fleet. The pilot, who had once been doubted by elite SEALs, was now requested specifically for the most dangerous missions. The bullet-damaged helicopter from that stormy night in Afghanistan had been retired and sent to a museum, where it served as a testament to both the courage of SEAL Team 7 and the skill of their pilot. Sarah now flew a newer, more advanced aircraft, but she kept a photo of the old Black Hawk in her quarters as a reminder of the night that changed everything. Admiral Harrison found her on the deck, enjoying the peaceful evening after months of intense operations. Since that first mission together, they had completed 17 more operations, each one successful, each one bringing everyone home safely. The Admiral's initial skepticism had transformed into unwavering confidence in Sarah's abilities. "Penny for your thoughts, Lieutenant," Harrison said, joining her at the rail. "Just thinking about how much has changed since we first met, sir," Sarah replied. "Remember when your team thought I was a liability?" Harrison chuckled. "I remember a lot of things from that night. I remember thinking you were either very brave or very crazy for flying into that compound during a firefight. I remember watching you fight a damaged helicopter through the worst storm I've ever seen, and I remember realizing that your call sign wasn't just words, it was a promise." The past 6 months had indeed been transformative. After word of the Afghanistan mission spread, other special operations units began requesting Sarah specifically for their most challenging operations. She had flown missions in places most people couldn't pronounce, under conditions that would terrify experienced pilots. There was the night extraction from a terrorist compound in Somalia, where Sarah had to land in complete darkness while being shot at from 3 directions. She had saved 12 hostages and a team of Delta Force operators that night, flying them to safety, despite taking several hits to her aircraft. Then there was the rescue mission in the mountains of Syria, where bad weather had trapped a team of Army Rangers for 3 days. When other pilots declared the conditions too dangerous to attempt a rescue, Sarah volunteered for the mission. She had flown through a blizzard at night, using only her instruments to navigate treacherous peaks, and brought all 15 Rangers home alive. Each mission added to her legend. Pilots throughout the Navy began studying her techniques and decision-making processes. Young aviators in flight school asked their instructors about the Iron Widow and what made her so special. But those who knew Sarah understood that her gift wasn't just technical skill. It was her absolute commitment to bringing everyone home safely, no matter the cost. Petty Officer Thompson approached them on the deck, walking with barely a limp despite the serious wound he had sustained 6 months earlier. His recovery had been complete, and he had returned to full duty with SEAL Team 7. The experience of being saved by Sarah's flying had made him one of her strongest supporters. "Evening, Admiral, Lieutenant," Thompson said, joining them at the rail. "Beautiful sunset." "How's the leg feeling, Bulldog?" Sarah asked. "Good as new, thanks to you getting me to medical attention so fast," Thompson replied. "You know, the whole team talks about that night, not just because of the mission's success, but because of what it taught us about judging people too quickly." Sarah had earned more than just respect from SEAL Team 7. She had earned their brotherhood. They now considered her an honorary member of their unit, someone they would trust with their lives without question. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Chief Williams had been particularly vocal about his changed opinion. The man who had once questioned Sarah's ability to handle combat stress now told anyone who would listen that she was the finest pilot he had ever flown with. His endorsement carried significant weight among the special operations community. "I've been thinking," Admiral Harrison said, "about what makes the difference between a good pilot and a great one. Technical skill is important, of course, but the truly great ones have something more. They have the courage to do what others won't, and the skill to succeed when others would fail." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Commander Nash, who had news that would change Sarah's career trajectory once again. Nash carried a folder marked "Classified" and wore the expression of someone about to deliver important information. "Sorry to interrupt," Nash said, "but Lieutenant Martinez, you need to see this. New orders just came through." Sarah took the folder and read the contents, her eyes widening with surprise. The orders were from the Pentagon itself, requesting her transfer to a newly formed Special Operations Aviation Unit. The assignment would mean working with the most elite forces in the military, flying the most dangerous missions imaginable. "They want you to help establish protocols for a new program," Nash explained. "Advanced helicopter operations in extreme conditions. Basically, they want you to teach other pilots how to do what you do." Admiral Harrison read over her shoulder, nodding with approval. "This is a tremendous opportunity, Sarah. You'd be shaping the future of special operations aviation." But Sarah felt conflicted. She had found her place with SEAL Team 7, developed bonds that went beyond professional relationships. The thought of leaving the men who had become like brothers to her was difficult to accept. "What about the team?" she asked. "We've got 3 more months of deployment scheduled." Thompson spoke up. "Ma'am, with respect, you've got to take this assignment. What you've learned, what you've accomplished, it's bigger than just our team now. There are pilots and special operations units all over the world who could benefit from your knowledge." The decision was difficult, but Sarah knew it was the right one. Over the next few weeks, she worked closely with SEAL Team 7 to transition her responsibilities to another pilot. The team organized a farewell ceremony that was both emotional and celebratory, honoring the pilot who had become part of their brotherhood. Chief Williams presented her with a custom patch, the SEAL Team 7 insignia combined with her Iron Widow call sign. "This is so you never forget where you belong," he said. "You'll always be one of us, no matter where your career takes you." The new assignment took Sarah to Quantico, Virginia, where she worked with military engineers and aviation experts to develop new training programs and operational procedures. The work was challenging and rewarding, allowing her to share her experience with pilots from all branches of the military. Sarah's reputation continued to grow as she trained hundreds of pilots in advanced combat techniques. Her methods became standard procedure for special operations aviation units worldwide. The young woman from Texas who had once faced skepticism about her abilities was now recognized as one of the premier military aviators of her generation. But perhaps the most significant change came in Sarah's personal life. During her time at Quantico, she met Dr. Michael Chen, a flight surgeon who worked with pilots recovering from injuries. Their relationship developed slowly, built on mutual respect and understanding of the demands of military service. Michael understood the pressures Sarah faced and the dedication required for her work. He had seen firsthand how the stress of combat operations could affect even the strongest people, and he admired Sarah's ability to maintain her humanity while excelling in such a demanding field. 2 years after leaving SEAL Team 7, Sarah received a wedding invitation that brought back memories of the mission that had changed everything. Petty Officer Thompson was getting married, and he specifically requested that she attend the ceremony. The invitation included a personal note. "You saved my life in more ways than one. Please come celebrate with the family." The wedding was held in Thompson's hometown in Georgia, and nearly the entire SEAL Team 7 was in attendance. Sarah was surprised to see how many of them had brought their families, eager to introduce their children to the pilot who had become part of their unit's legend. During the reception, Admiral Harrison, now retired, approached Sarah with a smile. "I have some news I think you'll appreciate," he said. The Pentagon is naming the new Special Operations Training Facility after you. The Martinez Center for Advanced Aviation will train the next generation of combat pilots." Sarah was speechless. To have a military facility named in her honor was recognition beyond anything she had ever imagined. But what made it even more special was seeing the faces of the men she had served with, the brothers in arms who had accepted her as one of their own. Chief Williams raised his glass for a toast. "To Iron Widow," he said, his voice carrying the respect and affection of years of shared service. "The pilot who proved that courage isn't about size or gender or background. It's about heart, and she's got more heart than anyone I've ever served with." As the evening wound down, Sarah found herself talking with some of the younger SEALs who had joined the team after her departure. They looked at her with the same mixture of curiosity and respect she remembered from her early days with the unit. "Ma'am," one of them asked, "what advice would you give to someone just starting their career in special operations?" Sarah thought for a moment before answering. "Never let anyone convince you that you don't belong. If you're willing to do whatever it takes to protect the people counting on you, then you have a place among the best. Skills can be learned, techniques can be practiced, but courage and dedication, those come from within." Later that night, as Sarah and Michael drove back to their hotel, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. From a small town in Texas to the most elite units in the military, she had proven that determination and skill could overcome any obstacle. "Do you ever regret not staying with SEAL Team 7? Michael asked. "Sometimes I miss the adrenaline, the close bonds with the team," Sarah admitted. "But what I'm doing now is important too. Every pilot I train, every technique I help develop, it might save lives someday. That's what really matters." The next morning, Sarah received a call that would define the next phase of her career. The Secretary of Defense was personally requesting her participation in a new international program designed to share advanced military aviation techniques with allied nations. It was an opportunity to influence military aviation on a global scale. As she considered the opportunity, Sarah thought back to that first meeting with SEAL Team 7, when the men had questioned whether she could handle combat stress. She remembered Admiral Harrison's skeptical expression, Chief Williams' doubts about her experience, and her own determination to prove them wrong. Now, years later, those same men spoke of her with the highest respect. Her techniques were taught in military schools around the world. Young pilots dreamed of earning a call sign like Iron Widow. She had not only proven herself worthy of their trust, she had become a symbol of excellence in military aviation. The call sign that had once been questioned was now legendary. Iron Widow represented more than just Sarah Martinez. It represented the idea that with enough courage, skill, and determination, anyone could protect those depending on them. It stood for the promise that no matter how dangerous the mission or how impossible the odds, there was always a way to bring everyone home safely. Sarah accepted the new assignment, knowing that her journey was far from over. There would be new challenges, new people to prove herself to, new lives to protect. But she faced the future with confidence, secure in the knowledge that she had earned her place among the best. As her plane lifted off from Georgia, carrying her toward new adventures and responsibilities, Sarah Martinez, call sign Iron Widow, smiled at the thought of all the pilots she would train, all the lives she might help save, and all the young aviators who would learn that with dedication and courage, they too could earn a call sign worthy of legend. The skeptical SEAL Admiral who had once questioned her abilities had become one of her strongest supporters. The men who had doubted her courage now spoke of her with reverence, and the pilot who had once felt she had everything to prove had become the standard by which others measured themselves. In the end, Iron Widow had become more than just a call sign. It had become a legacy.